Right, hello there ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another video we've got for you today. And today we are having a look at another HDMI port replacement. And this one was sent up because it has a loose HDMI port. So I disassembled the machine, and upon removing the shield, I actually found a couple of stringy sort of bits laying across here. Little bits of clear, stringy stuff. And I was like, I know exactly what that is. That's hot glue. And I swear down, I am not making this up. We turn the board over. And yeah, it would appear, and honestly, I have not done this. This was sent up because it had a loose port, and the reason it would appear it's got a loose port is because somebody has simply tried to glue this HDMI port in place. Now then, I'm not entirely sure if they've at all tried to solder it, because of course it's covered in about 10 gallons of hot melt, but we will have a look and we will see if we can get rid of some of this. So, first things first is to just try and gently pick off around the port, because of course we don't want to go ripping anything that we shouldn't do. And as you can see, it just wiggles back and forth. Now I don't want to do too much at this, because like I say, if it's a case of it's actually partially soldered, then of course we're going to start damaging things. So I'm just going to gently start to try and pick away at some of this. There we go. So it's now come off in its entirety, thankfully. But what have we got left? So let's see if we can zoom you back out for a minute. So yeah, we've actually got a little bit of damage on this port, and there you go, you can actually see there. So yeah, some of the pins don't actually look to be in the best sort of state, do they? In fact, most of them, not only are they misaligned, but they don't actually even seem to be soldered to the pads. So it would appear that there is some solder actually on the legs, so it looks like somebody has at least tried to solder it and then failed miserably, and then given it up as a bad job and just tried to glue it. And then of course from there, that's made a bit of a mess. So we are going to see what we can do about that. So the first thing is we are going to remove this old port. Now this is a pretty quick process, and anybody who's wondering just how quick it is to actually replace one of these things, well, don't look away, because blinking you'll miss it. Turn on our air station. I'm going to apply a little bit of flux to the surrounding pins of the port. Now then, it would appear to me that the port isn't actually soldered into there, so that was probably there from the previous port, and then they've just tried to add a little bit of solder to the top, but they've not got it anywhere near hot enough to actually melt down the holes and fill it in, so it's just flapping in the breeze. So they've just tried to glue it in the end, and of course it's not worked, and it all looks a bit nasty, does this port, so we're not going to mess about. We're just going to get to removing the old port. We have our air station set at 475, and the airflow is at 100 litres of air per minute. And we're going to pop some fume extraction on, so this might get a bit noisy. Okay, so we're just going to start to heat the area around the port. Now the important thing to, of course, to remember with this is is that the HDMI port itself is actually sat on a big copper ground plane, if you like, so it absorbs a lot of the heat we put into the board. So it's important to get the surrounding area of the board hot before you try and remove the port. Because if you don't get it hot enough and you just try and lift this, you're going to rip out most of the pads it's attached to. And then you're going to give yourself a massive headache. So you can sort of see that now start to move of its own volition. There you go. So that has now come out of its own accord, look. Nice and cleanly. Of course we have absolutely no idea as to what condition anything's in underneath there. But we'll get an idea when we turn it over in a moment. So we're just going to try and clean up that area of the board with a little bit of desoldering braid. I'm just going to get a drop of flux on there and try and get rid of most of the surface stuff. Most of the surface stuff gone, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get some of this really fine 0.8mm wick with a bit of hot air again. And this time we're going to go down the holes. Okay, so those holes now are nice and clear of the old solder. So of course if we go back topside now and take a look at what we've got, you can hopefully see there thankfully our pads look intact. So I'm just going to apply a little bit of solder there. And of course we're going to get some more desolder braid. And we're just going to start to clean that area of the old solder. Okay, now of course we may possibly have a bit of a problem here. As we saw earlier, our port came out nice and easily, and it came out nice and cleanly. However, it would appear that on this far left side, as you can see it, it would appear that the pad is, I don't know if it's missing or if it's just heavily oxidised. I guess we'll find that out in a sec. So we're just going to clean the board off with a little bit of IPA and a fairly stiff bristle paintbrush. Got a cotton bud Have a Q-tip, as you might know them in the States. Okay. So that in pan, we're just going to give that a little bit of a scrape back with the edge of this tweezer blade. And as you can see there now, that's come nice and shiny, so we're just going to give that another little dab of IPA. And that pad looks now to be nice and clean, and it's come back up okay, so that's good. That means that all our HDMI pads on the board are intact. So we're just going to change the tip on our soldering iron here. I'm going to apply a drop of flux to the pads. I'm just going to run some welded solder back over those contact pads now, just to tin them up in preparation for our new port. So those are now all nicely tinned up, and those are now ready to receive our new HDMI port. So you have a strip of these nice new shiny ports, so I'm just going to take one now. Okay, so you might not be able to see this, but we'll see if we can get you some focus on that. I'm not sure how well this is going to come out in the video, but as you can see there, the pins don't quite line up. And they do sit a little bit off to the right hand side of the pads, so we're going to have to shift this port left. So to do that, just get a pair of pliers and bend the legs out slightly to the right. So as you can see there now, those legs are bent slightly to the right, so we're just going to pop these back in the holes. So those now are looking a little bit straighter now, so that's cool. So what we're going to do is we're just going to tack a couple of these pins down into position. Okay, so we've tacked a couple of pins down there, so that port now is not going to move. And we're going to apply some flux to the back of those pins. And that's quite a lot of flux, but you'll see why in a moment. So we are going to use a technique called drag soldering on this port, and basically what that is where you basically get a small amount of solder tinned on the end of your iron, and then you actually start on one pin and literally just drag the ball across the pins, and the flux will encourage the solder to actually stick to the legs and the pads and actually follow the iron tip. So what you'll end up with is a very nice flat uniform soldering job on your pins, and it actually looks really nice. It's really quick, and it's the best way of doing it. So a tiny bit on the end of your iron, you start on one end, and you literally drag the solder over the pins. When you get to the end, you clean your iron and go again, and that will remove any excess. Okay, so now we've done that, what we're going to do is we're just going to get some more IPA down the back of that port. We're going to brush those pins clean now. Clean end of our cotton bud tip there. Okay, so we've repaired this, and I have actually just read the note that the guy who owns this machine has actually attached to it. And this, in fact, was a botched repair from a shop in Canterbury. And without naming them too specifically, think of a very, very famous, fabled underwater city. And you should get the clue for the name from it right there. As I say, in Canterbury, in Kent of the UK. They'd also managed to break this power button. They sheared the little metal tab, so we've had to super glue that back in place. But now we've actually done a proper port replacement on this thing. You can see now our power button actually works. And a HDMI output, and everything looks lovely as usual there now. So yeah, it's the first time I've seen somebody actually try to hot glue a HDMI port in, but there we are. And everything's done there now, so we will call this fixed, boys and girls, and see you on the next vid.